So, hello students, right now we have to move to the next phase, how the three steps of your situations are analyzing the equilibrium effect of the equilibrium price and quantity. Changes in the equilibrium due to the shift in demand curve in the previous class we complete. Now, changes in the equilibrium due to the shift in supply curve. Now, if you are analyzing the things, quantity supply, it is a function of its price, goal of the producer, level of technology, price of raw material and so on. While you take the shift in supply curve, we take price to be remains constant. These are the component, goal, preferences, etc. If these things to be increases, supply curve shifts towards right. Okay. Now, we have to analyzing the three steps here. Let us go and take the one situation. Suppose for example, we take the same continuing the example of your that is called as ice cream example. In the previous the demand shifted because the hot climate, the demand for ice cream to be increases. Now, we take the supply side. While the ice cream it is supplied, the can is to be prepared, the can supply the ice cream can to be prepared, the component is to be there. Now, due to because in summer you know there are different natural calamity it may be takes place. Suppose there is some hurricane, cyclonic storm to be there. Okay. If that to be takes place in the society, then what happen? Those ingredients which are required to manufacturing the ice cream, let us say sugar cane and so on. Sugar canes because we required sugar comes from the sugar cane, right. So, what happened due to these natural calamities, your crops are to be destroyed. যেতে ସବୁ ଶସ୍ୟ ଥିଲା ସବୁ ନଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଗଲା, ଦେନ୍ ଯେତେ ଶସ୍ୟ ନଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଯିବ ତାର କ'ଣ ହେବ, ସପ୍ଲାଏ ରିଡ୍ୟୁସ୍ କରିଗଲା, ସପ୍ଲାଏ ଯଦି ରିଡ୍ୟୁସ୍ କରିଯିବ ଆମର କ'ଣ ହେଲା ପ୍ରାଇସ୍ କାହା ଉପରେ ନା ପ୍ରାଇସ୍ ଇନକ୍ରିଜ୍ କରିଯିବ ନା କାହିଁକି ସିଚୁଏସନ୍ ଆରାଇଜ୍ ହେଲା ବିକଜ ଅଫ୍ ଦ ସମର୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ ସମ୍ ନ୍ୟାଚୁରାଲ୍ calamity to be takes place, therefore the supply to be reduces because of the crop to be destroyed. That leads to what? Now, if there is supply is to be shifted, supply to be reduces, that impact the rise in the price. That thing we have to show with the help of the curve. Okay. Now, let us say start with the initial situation. This is the price of your ice cream. There is the quantity demanded and supply of ice cream. Now, this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. This is the initial point of equilibrium and initial quantity is Q1 and initial price is P1. Before any changes in the natural calamities or something else, we take the second part, the shift in supply curve. As we take some natural calamity to be takes place, that leads to the crops to be destroyed. As the crops to be destroyed, then what happen? Definitely supply reduces. Supply reduces means supply curve shifts towards left. Supply curve shift towards left. Now, supply shift है situation कौन जानते ना supply curve shift towards left. कहाँ को shift करिबा? प्रथमे जानते supply को change करिबा. Supply कुआड़ी जीवो ना left को जीवो. Now, supply shifted from S to S dash. That meet the given demand at the point let us say E2. Equilibrium move from E1 to E2. Corresponding to this new equilibrium, we find quantity reduces, but what happens the price? Price increases. You have to analyzing the situation, changing in the equilibrium. You have to compare the old equilibrium to the new equilibrium. In the old equilibrium, the demand and supply of ice cream is to be remain the same. There is no change in the price of the product. But due to the natural calamities, the supply reduces. Supply reduces means supply curve shift towards left. As it shift towards left, that meet the demand curve at the point separate point E2, then price increases, quantity fall. So, remember the three steps, always the three steps of analyzing it. First of all, you have to judge which one to be shift. Demand को shift करिबा, supply को shift करिबा, किंबा दीटा को shift करिबा, both को shift करिबा. Second हमें कौन देखिबा? जदि डिमांड कि सप्लाई को शिफ्ट करछे कुआड को शिफ्ट करिबा राइट को शिफ्ट करिबा ना लेफ्ट को शिफ्ट करिबा तापर थर्ड स्टेप कौन एनालाइजिंग करिबा ना ये देखा इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस रे कौन इंपैक्ट पकाउछि एंड इक्विलिब्रियम क्वांटिटी रे कौन इंपैक्ट पकाउछि ए तीनटा स्टेप सब मन रखि सो व्हाट टू एनालाइजिंग इट ओके नाउ आफ्टर नोइंग द डिमांड एंड सप्लाई शिफ्ट we have to take the third situation where both that means demand sari gala supply sari gala but then both ko jiba then the both to be changes then what happened to the equilibrium price and quantity. Now exactly in the same manner we narrated one example you need to understand how both to be changes as in the demand case shift in the demand case ame kon nele na jodi hot climate thibo jodi amara ice cream ro demand बढ़ी jibo ताहले ame demand curve को shift करेबा ठीक अछि. सेकंड कोन कले ना सप्लाई को शिफ्ट को सिचुएशन करछे ना सेम आइसक्रीम एग्जांपल नेले हॉट समर रे ना एठी आमे कोन देखुछे ना ड्यू टू द नेचुरल कैलामिटीज हमर क्रॉप सब सुगर केन प्रोडक्शन सब रिड्यूस हे गला ताना नष्ट हे गला सब तापर आमे देखले सप्लाई टा शिफ्ट करछि लेफ्ट को सप्लाई जो शिफ्ट करछि लेफ्ट को आमे देखले ना प्राइस रा इंपैक्ट टा कोन पकोछि वर्तमान आमे नबा गोटे एग्जांपल जोतरे कि आमे दीटा जिंस देखबा बिकॉज़ वी विल टेक द थ्री सिचुएशन आमे फर्स्ट एग्जांपल देखले डिमांड को शिफ्ट कले सेकेंड को एग्जांपल देखले सप्लाई को शिफ्ट कले बर्तमान आमे आ गोटे एग्जांपल नबा जोतरे कि दीटा जाको शिफ्ट करी आमे पंच करबा बोथ डिमांड एंड सप्लाई को. लेट्स से द सेम सिचुएशन ऑफ द आइसक्रीम डिमांड इन द हॉट समर. If you take into account that hot summer situation, let's say natural calamity to be taken, any hurricane, cyclonic storm to be takes place, hurricane to be taken into account, and that leads to the disaster in the productions of the crop. When the crop is to be reduces, then what happen? Now, if the crop to be reduces, that is one part, and in the summer the demand for the ice cream is to increases. Mark both the points. One side demand increases because of the hot summer, and second due to that hot summer some natural calamity to be takes place, supply reduces. How both the terms to be affect the equilibrium price, that we have to think right now. जदि आमे demand को बढ़ेबा because of the hot climate demand taste preferences increases, demand shift होबा, and due to the natural calamities we have to take the supply to be reduces, therefore आमे supply को take into account करिबा. वर्तमान आमे दीटा जिंस को पंच करिबा in order to explain how it put impact upon the equilibrium price and supply. Changes in equilibrium due to shift in both demand and supply, right. This is the third case. Now before proceeding we start with the initial point of equilibrium. This is the price and this is the quantity. Equilibrium, that is the price of ice cream, this is the demand and supply of ice cream, and here is the demand curve for the ice cream, here is the supply curve of ice cream, and they are intersect at a particular point that is called as equilibrium, and corresponding to that E1 we find equilibrium quantity is Q1 and equilibrium price is to be P1. This is the initial step. Before changing in any situation, that means there is no change, there is nothing to be changes is there. Now what happened to be here, you have to considering both the demand and supply, we have to change both the demand as well as the supply, but there is a certain cases are there. Let us say the first case we take the demand shifted, that means demand curve, that is the demand it will shift towards right, demand, that is the quantity demand shifts towards right, it is increases, it is to rise, it towards rise, it to be shift towards right, and supply curve, the supply curve, that is the quantity supply, it shift towards left because of the productions fall. But what is the impact that the changing in the demand and changing in the supply, changes in the demand and changes in the supply, if changes in the demand, quantity demand is more than the changes in the supply, then what happened to the equilibrium price and quantity? If changes in the quantity demand is less than changes in the quantity supply, then what happened to the equilibrium quantity? And the last situation, changes in the quantity demand exactly equals to the changing in the quantity supply. How it puts some impact on this? In this particular case, when both are to be taken into considering the both the terms, now we have to consider these three cases of it. First, if that is the rise in demand is more than the fall in supply. In the second case the reverse part of it, in last one that is the both are be changes in the same direction. That means the same, that the changes is be same, and how it puts some impact upon the equilibrium price and quantity. Let us start with the first. Here demand to be shifted at a greater extent, first case demand to be shifted to the greater extent to the change in supply. Now demand curve to be like this, demand increases, demand for ice cream to be increases at a faster rate to the fall in the supply of ice cream. If the supply of ice cream to be fall, then supply curve to be here. Now mark where is the point of equilibrium, now new point of equilibrium to be here, and this is the point E2, and corresponding to that we find equilibrium quantity of the ice cream to be increases and that of price also be increases, but price increases much more than the quantity. Change in price is more than change in quantity. This is the situation of the first case when quantity demand it will changes at greater extent to the changes in the supply. Now we have to take the second part of it. Suppose changes in the supply is to be more than the change in demand. I mean, let us say here at the price and quantity, and both the curves are intersect each other at a particular point, that is called the E1, and corresponding to that we find the equilibrium quantity is Q1 and equilibrium price to be P1. It is initial situation. बर्तमान आम कौन देखा ये डिमांड अधिक नहीं सप्लाई कम बढ़े कम ही right now we have to take the situation when demand rises at the later less component as compared to the rise in the supply curve. That means supply curve to be increases at the faster rate. Low down of the supply is to be more. And a huge amount of natural disaster to be takes place. जहाँ फल कि मैंने हमको देखिए तो supply बहुत कमी गला. जब supply का बहुत कमी जाइए as compared to the rise in the demand inside the summer season, then how it put the impact upon the price and quantity. Where is the point of equilibrium? Equilibrium at the point E2. Mark the equilibrium quantity. Equilibrium quantity right now fall. And what about the price? Price increases. प्राइस राइज करुची बट क्वांटिटी फॉल करिगला एठी हमें कौन देखिले ना एठी देखले बोथ क्वांटिटी बढ़ुची प्राइस भी बढ़ुची बट ए केस रे हमें देखिया पाउचे ना क्वांटिटी कमी जाउची प्राइस बढ़ी जाउची राइट नाउ द लास्ट केस here we have to take the changes in the quantity and changing in the supply. If the both are in the same exactly the same way of the changes, then how the equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price to be affected. Let us say we derive draw that particular situations here this side. Let us say we take the same quantity here and we take the term price equilibrium price on this particular vertical line to be that price, and demand curve downward sloping, supply curve upward sloping, and this is the point of equilibrium initially, and equilibrium quantity and price is there. आमे बर्तन कौन देखा ना जी परिमाण रे डिमांड बढ़ुची से परिमाण रे सप्लाईटा कमुची. If it is so, then how it put impact upon the equilibrium quantity and price. आमे केते देखले ना डिमांड बढ़िला this much, supply मध्य बढ़ुची more or less same extent, the same amount of supply बढ़ुची. If the same amount of supply बढ़ुची ताहले equilibrium कोडी होची ना E2 रे. Now what do you find? There is no change in the quantity but price increases. आमे तीन सिचुएशन एट स्टडी कले. प्रथम सिचुएशन देखिले डिमांड अधिक बढ़ुची as compared to the fall in supply, ताले both quantity and price to be changes, both are increasing direction. एटी देखुचे डिमांड बढ़ुची कम amount as compared to the supply, therefore price increases but quantity fall. but if both to be changes exactly the same way, then what happened? There is no change in the quantity, but price to be increases. These are the three different situations in order to analyzing the components of your equilibrium. But each and every case we have to analyzing the three steps. First we have to judge which one we have to shift, demand or supply, which direction they have to shift, then how they put some impact upon the equilibrium price and quantity. Now we have to put a particular table to explaining the whole concept, which we are able to be graph them also be, right. Let us start with the table. In this particular table, you have to analyzing the impact upon the changing in the equilibrium price and quantity due to the change in demand and supply, right. First of all, there is no change in supply. This side we take into account no change in supply. And this side no change in demand. If there is no change in the demand and price, there is no change in the demand and supply, then how it put impact upon the price and quantity? Demand change हेलानी कि supply change हेलानी, ताले हमें equilibrium price और quantity ଉପରେ कौन impact आसला? Now in this case, price to be remain the same and quantity also will remain the same. There is no change in the equilibrium price and quantity. Now second, there is no change in supply. Right now supply increases, quantity supply increases. If quantity supply increases and quantity demand also increases, both are increasing directions, both are in the increasing direction. If both are increases, then what happened to the equilibrium price and quantity? हमें बर्तन एटी लिखिबा दीटा को जेतले राइज करूची, quantity demand rise करिगला, quantity supply मध्ये rise करूची. Then in this case na quantity increase करिबो, quantity increase करिबो, but price it to be ambiguous. That means we are unable to confusing the terms how it to be changes. The price it to be ambiguous to be that, right. It will maybe increase, maybe fall, depending on the situation. Now supply, quantity supply falls, quantity demand also falls, both to be reduces, quantity demand reduces and quantity supply also be reduces. Then how it put some impact upon it? Now in this situation quantity to be reduces, एटी कौन थिला quantity increase करथला, एटी quantity reduce करछे but price to be remain ambiguous, right. Now after judging the terms, there is no change in demand and supply, same price and quantity, both increases, quantity increases, price may increase, may not be increase, we can say in the perfect directions. If both fall, quantity definitely fall, again price we can say according to the situation it will maybe increase, maybe fall. Now we have to fill the rest part of it. Let us say no change in the demand, demand as such, supply increases, demand as such there, supply increases, then what happened to the equilibrium price and quantity? In this case equilibrium price market, demand constant, supply shift towards right. If supply shift towards right, quantity increases, price to be reduces. That means price fall karibo, quantity amako increase karijibo. In the same way we have to move to the, there is no change in this demand, but there is the supply falls means price increase karijibo, quantity fall karijibo. That is the first situation you have to remember, right. So after that move to the second one. In the second part, let us say quantity increases, no change in the supply, supply किसी changes होनी, supply as such अच्छी, demand increase करिएला. If the demand shift towards right and there is no change in the supply, then what happened? Now price increase करिबो, quantity भी increase करिए उसे. Price increase करिबो, quantity भी increase करिबो. And if you come down to this particular situation, demand fall, no change in the supply, just reverse part of it, price fall as well as your quantity to be fall. Now come down to here in this particular block, demand fall kala and supply rise kari jaଉଛି. Demand fall, supply rise. In this case, price to be fall but quantity to be ambiguous. The question need to be that whether the quantity to be increase or fall we can say, but definitely price to be reduces. Now the last block to be that the demand shifted towards right, demand increase korche and supply fall korche, demand increase korche, supply fall korche. In that case price definitely rise. And what about the quantity? Quantity you can't say whether it will increase or decrease, that will be ambiguous. So ये जो जिनसटा में देखेले 9 सिचुएशन ए 9 टांग सिचुएशन को 9 टा डिफरेंट कॉप कर देखा पड़ो राइट आमे कौन करचे आमे ए सिचुएशन देखाई देले नो चेंज इन द डिमांड सप्लाई रिड्यूस कला आमे आको देखाइले नो चेंज इन द डिमांड सप्लाई रिड्यूस करे that we have to take into account. And if there is a no change in the supply and there is a changes in the demand, then how it put the impact on the price. I mean individually नले आम देखा सब 9 टांग सिचुएशन गोटे गोटे कर्व करी आमको देखेले जानी परिबा जे केमिति इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस एंड इक्विलिब्रियम क्वांटिटी हमको चेंजेस होची. लेट्स स्टार्ट विथ वन बाय वन ऑफ इट. आम गोटे गोटे साइड रे जिबा देन सेटू देखै चलिबा. लेट्स से स्टार्ट विथ द फर्स्ट बिट. नो चेंज इन द डिमांड, नो चेंज इन द सप्लाई. Price and quantity. Here is equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. This is your supply curve and this is the demand curve. Equilibrium 1 is to be E1, quantity is to be Q1 and price is to be P1. बर्तमान देखिए नो चेंज, डिमांड चेंज कलानी कि सप्लाई चेंज कलानी ताले कौन हला इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस चेंज हबो कि किछि नो नथिंग इज दैट इज द प्राइस टू बी रिमेन द सेम, क्वांटिटी टू बी रिमेन द सेम. दिस इज टू बी ओवर, दिस ब्लॉक इज टू बी कंप्लीटेड. ओके दैट्स राइट. Now come down to the second part. No change in the demand. Demand किसी change हबन. Demand आस्ते आस्ते वो. Supply increase करिबो. Supply towards right को shift कला. Supply right को shift कला. Supply increases. Supply towards right shift कला. Then it made the increased demand to be there. Then what happened to the quantity and price? Quantity increase करियो, price fall करिबो. Price fall करियो, quantity increase करिबो. ओके बुझिया राइट. बर्तमान सिचुएशन रे एठी तले इक्विलिब्रियम एठी आसुचे हमरा क्वांटिटी राइज करी गला, प्राइस कोन होचे ना प्राइस ता फॉल करी जाउचे. ओके सेकंड पार्ट इज ओवर. ओके दैट्स राइट. इट शुड बी reducing it, I mean erasing this part back to the original. Okay that's right. Now there is no change in the demand. Demand किसी changes होनी but supply falls. Supply falls का मतलब supply का shift towards left. Supply curve जब shift towards left हो जी equilibrium कोड हबो this point रे. This is the point of E2 and what happened to the quantity? Quantity fall, quantity reduce करी जाउचे and what happened to the price? ना price increase करी जाउचे. Price increase करिबो, quantity fall करिबो. Clear? That's right. Now move to the next part. Okay. Now come down to here. If there is no change in the supply, supply कितने changes हमारे, supply constant रखेगा, right? Quantity demand increase. If the quantity demand increases, let's say demand shifted towards right. Demand shifted towards right. Demand increase कला, ताले हमें कौन सा कुछ है ना given supply को intercept कला at the point E2, हमें quantity बढ़ीला, price भी बढ़ीला, price बढ़ीबा, quantity भी बढ़ीबा. ओके क्लियर इट. जिते डिमांड टा सप्लाई किसी चेंजेस होनी, सप्लाई कांस्टेंट रहते, डिमांड इंक्रीज करेगा, डिमांड राइज करेगा, इंटरसेप्ट कला न्यू इक्विलिब्रियम रे, प्राइस इंक्रीज कला, क्वांटिटी इंक्रीज कर जाउछ. नाउ मूव टू द लास्ट, आई मीन द नेक्स्ट वन फॉर टुडे. सपोज दिस इज द पॉइंट ऑफ इक्विलिब्रियम, इनिशियल पॉइंट ऑफ इक्विलिब्रियम E1. Supply no change in the supply, supply to be as such, demand fall. If demand fall, I mean sorry not this one, if the demand fall, demand curve shift towards left, demand curve set towards left and it met the given supply curve at the separate point E2, what happened to the quantity? Quantity fall and price also be false. Mark it here, quantity fall and price falls, both are false. Okay. So, we clearly explain this particular column and this particular row also be, and few things are left which is to be going to be covered in the coming class. Okay. So, this is all about for today. In the coming class we have to start from this equilibrium and to proceed towards the completing the whole concept, how the 3 steps of the changes situation to be analyzing the point of the equilibrium. Thank you all.